Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. What's up, Philippines? Welcome to another reaction video with Nelly. I hope you're having an amazing day. Today I am reacting to an educational topic actually. Have you ever wondered why there are so many sailors that are Filipino? I can tell you why in today's video. So today I'm reacting to why 30% of sailors are Filipino. So I would say before we start into this video, just make sure you subscribe, don't miss out on any videos, hit the notification bell, support this channel with some love, spread it, share it with your friends if you enjoy it, and without further ado, I would say let's just jump right into it, shall we?
Hong Kong is 92% ethnically Chinese, but stroll through the central business district on any given Sunday and you wouldn't know it.
Oh, I've been there.
Thousands upon thousands of domestic helpers socialize on cardboard scattered across parks, walkways, and sidewalks on their one and only day off. 55% are from the Philippines, and virtually all women. A similar dynamic, but for men, plays out on the high seas. Filipinos make up 1.4% of the world's population, but roughly 30% of the world's shipping crew. Take a cruise, for instance, and there's a very good chance you'll have a Filipino maid, cook, or server. It's not just low-skill work either. 1/5 of California registered nurses are from the Philippines, despite comprising only 4% of its population. On any given day, 10% of all living Filipinos are employed overseas, 2.3 million of which are temporary workers. The reason may seem obvious. Money. The average nurse can make 15 times more working abroad. Even domestic helpers make far more than they would at home. But why the Philippines specifically? The country is neither the world's largest, fastest growing, nor even poorest potential source of labor. Being the cheapest is a tough competitive advantage to maintain in a world of 7 billion people. There will always be someone somewhere more desperate. And yet, the Philippines has remained the world's go-to source of labor for decades, almost monopolizing entire industries. So, what's the real reason? Sponsored by Brilliant. Learn math, science, and computer science the intuitive way with a link in the description. In 1973, the Middle East went on strike, cutting off the world's supply of oil. Between December 1973 and January 1974, the global price of crude more than doubled, from $26 to $61 per barrel. For the Philippines, which imported 80% of its oil, this made a bad situation much worse. The Marcos government was already busy fighting a communist rebellion, had declared martial law, and was suffering a balance of trade deficit when consumer prices went through the roof, and unemployment soon followed. But the rise in oil prices had a second unintended consequence: the fundamental transformation of the global shipping industry. When the price of oil rose, demand for tankers fell dramatically. But because a ship ordered today is only actually delivered years down the road, their supply continued rising long after they were no longer needed. As you can see, demand per tanker fell for roughly the next 10 years. And during this period of excess supply, shipping became far less profitable. To cut costs, companies increasingly began registering their ships in flag of convenience countries like Panama and Liberia, where they could bypass national labor laws. Unions negotiated jobs for Japanese, Norwegian, and Greek captains, but the bottom ranks were suddenly open to the world. And who better to fill them than the masses of recently unemployed Filipinos? Shipping companies didn't just get access to a cheap, willing, and able workforce from Saudi Arabia, English, the international language of the sea, but also their favorite kind: temporary. Migrant workers are a capitalist vision of globalization, perpetuating national borders when convenient, bypassing them when not. By importing labor from abroad, you profit from wage differentials between countries, but don't have to worry about anti-immigrant backlash. You can hire them as soon as you have a job to be done, and fire them just as fast when it's over, with none of the annoying paperwork. Virtually all the power in this relationship lies with the employer, some of which even take away the passports of their workers. Until March of last year, for instance, domestic helpers in Saudi Arabia
I'm
needed
really
their
not a fan of
employer's
these robot
permission to
voices,
leave
by
the
the way.
country.
It's educational, but it's kind of like
Needless to say, this serendipitous combination of
very
push in the
impersonal.
form of unemployment in the Philippines and pull in the form of demand for cheap labor produced an explosion of Filipino migrant workers. In 1960, 15% of all seafarers were Asian. By 1987, that number had more than quadrupled to 67%. The next wave came from where the first originated, the Middle East. The Gulf states had grand visions for what to do with their new wealth, but no one willing to actually build their underwater hotels and giant empty picture frames. That's where foreign labor comes in. Today, 26% of Filipino migrants work in Saudi Arabia, 14% in the UAE, 6% in Kuwait, and 5% in Qatar. A significant portion of the rest work in Hong Kong or Singapore as domestic helpers, doing the laundry, childcare, cooking, cleaning, and everything in between for middle-class households. Some families even have 2 or 3. But this is really only half the answer to our original question: why Filipinos came to dominate these specific labor niches. 50 years ago, the reason was basically coincidence, timing more than anything. But even if the Philippines was the cheapest source of labor in 1970, it hasn't remained that way for 5 consecutive decades. What began as a temporary response to a unique set of circumstances, in other words, soon became a deliberate strategy. The money workers send home, called remittances, has grown from a nice side gig to a pillar on which the entire national economy depends, representing 10% of the country's GDP. At $35 billion a year, remittances could be considered the Philippines' second largest export, just behind electronics at $38 billion, 3 times higher than third place machinery, and 13 times larger than fourth place copper. In the words of one former official, without these overseas jobs reducing domestic unemployment, there would be revolution.
Yeah.
And so, to sustain this flow of cash, the Philippine government has become an unofficial broker of labor. When the president called herself the CEO of a global Philippine enterprise in 2003, she wasn't kidding. The state functions in many ways like a corporation, one whose core business is selling one particular commodity: labor. Government departments travel to trade shows, negotiate with foreign countries, and sometimes even place labor directly. It even does marketing, producing posters, videos, and ads reinforcing the perception of Filipinos as loyal, hardworking, and docile. Yet, despite all this, quote, the state does not promote overseas employment as a means to sustain economic growth and achieve national development. The government, in other words, is uneasy about its participation in what some have called legal human trafficking. It takes credit for the inflow of remittances, but no responsibility when workers are abused. When they return home, workers are greeted as heroes, not unlike members of the military in America. Sending money home is characterized as an act of nationalism, and each year the president celebrates Migrant Workers' Day. But it's not just the government reinforcing this system. You might think Filipino migrant workers would aggressively fight back against these stereotypes, and some do, but many don't see themselves as being exploited. Despite high rates of abuse, harassment, and harsh working conditions, overseas work is often viewed in a positive light, as an opportunity. An opportunity that's by no means guaranteed. Many see themselves as competing with Indonesians, Pakistanis, and Nepalese.
Wow.
Reinforcing stereotypes, even about oneself, is a powerful way of preserving those limited opportunities.
Alright, it is definitely, it's a coin with 2 sides. You have a lot of opportunities, but you also sacrifice a lot. I personally come from a background where family members of mine went abroad to work there and earn more than the average Bosnian. Example was my dad who worked in Slovenia. Another example was my uncle who worked in Austria. So that was very common. My dad's dad used to work in Germany, so yeah, comes with a lot of sacrifices as well. But on the other hand, it also built a lot of opportunities for me. But yeah, it's good to educate and just kind of like understand why is it like that? Why are there so many Filipinos abroad working as nurses, as seafarers? So yeah, interesting facts for today's video. I hope you learned something new and you will tune into the next one. I think I need a bright topic for the next one. This one was very fact driven, so I was just listening and kind of like taking all the information in, but we learned something new, right? So I'll see you guys on the next one here on What's Up Philippines? Au revoir.